As the story goes, I lasted 3 weeks because it just wasn't for me. I didn't go from me to a big team. It's kind of increased gradually over a number of years. You haven't just got to dedicate time for design, you've got to dedicate time for business development and lead generation and marketing. Businesses shouldn't necessarily be driven by creativity. You've got to kind of find that halfway house between kind of like how creative do you want to take it? How creative can your industry be? The way in which I always compare it is the difference between taking a brief and building a brief. The result of that is that the prospect actually reported back to the company to say, who did you send? What we saw was a totally different business presenting what felt like a totally different offering.
Hi, good evening everyone. My name is Niket and welcome again to another episode of Design Diaries. We had some very interesting 2 sessions earlier on Design Diaries when we had invited Prithviraj Janiti and Dante Fiorani from Spain. Today we have someone really special with us, all the way from UK, London. He's a good friend of mine and he's been in the industry of design since the last 20 years. And his forte being not just good design, but designing which is backed with a strong strategy and strategy that helps build good brands and gives value for the clients. So please welcome Simon Hutchings from London. Hi, Simon.
Hi, Niket. How are you?
I'm doing good.
You're good. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on board today.
Thank you for accepting the invitation and being here on Thinkly today. And hopefully we'll have a very interesting discussion on design, on going more detailed into the brand identity, the strategy, the thoughts behind it, and some value addition to the business owners and the design people on the group. So Simon, tell me a little bit more about your background. What have you studied and your journey till date?
Yeah, it seems such a long time ago, Niket, now, to be honest. I was looking back at it, like prepping a little bit for this, and it seems like a long way away. So, but yeah, I mean, so like you said, I've been in the industry since 2000 now, and it's been an interesting process, I guess, because originally I actually studied product design in the late 90s in the hope of working, I mean, similar to Dante, actually. So he's a very keen angler. I'm a very keen angler as well. And I had kind of this big hope of working in the fishing industry to design various bits of tackle and things like that. Weirdly, at the end of that kind of time that I was learning that, I found that I was having more enjoyment actually creating the designs for the marketing that would support the products. So I kind of retrained after that, did my product design degree, came out of that, and then just retrained with the thought that I'll go into graphics. And then started work around about 2000, working for a print and signage business back then. That was my first break. Someone saw a little essence of something that decided to kind of give me a chance. From there, I've kind of just gained lots more experience, really. So I got headhunted by a print house in the southwest of England, worked there for a few years as a senior designer, and that gave me a massive, just allowed me to learn everything about print basically at that time. They had actual Heidelberg printers in-house as well. So I was able to kind of absorb the smells and the sounds and everything that goes with it, which I still love today, to be honest. It's still sort of ingrained in me. But then a few years later, decided to have a move to the South Coast and started working for a South Coast advertising agency, quite a big firm. They had satellite offices dotted around. But I kind of say that's where I really cut my teeth in design, to be honest. Did a lot of work in the hospitality sector. And obviously, advertising is quite fast paced. We had a decent sized team. But interestingly, they brought me on board at the time because they wanted to build out the kind of the print design element of that studio. They didn't have a huge amount of experience with regards to print and how to progress it forwards. So they brought me in to kind of help build that and work with some of the hospitality clients that we had in the local area. But like I said, fast-paced agency world, it was fantastic at the time, and I'm so glad I did it. I think I was probably there for about 5 years in total, and it was a tough pull to move me out of that, to be honest. But London was calling, as it tends to with most people, and my girlfriend was living in the London area then as well, now my wife. So we've been together for a long time, and had this kind of dream of this freelancing in London dream that I wanted to that scratch that I needed to itch. As the story goes, I lasted 3 weeks because it just wasn't for me. Train traveling into London every day, uncertainty of not knowing where you're going to be. You have your name on like 2 or 3 different agencies. They might need you one week, they might not need you the next. And it's like that level of uncertainty, really. And I think, in all honesty, it was a bit too much for me to handle. So I kind of switched tact a little bit and moved over to an in-house position, actually, for a global tech company. Now, this is where my knowledge shifted slightly, and I think for me, this is kind of another pivotal point in my career, because I was basically head of creative for a global company. So I was working under the global head of marketing and managing the creative for 6 offices around the world. Now, I think the interesting thing for me at this point was the connection between marketing and sales. So obviously, like working for agencies and print houses, you kind of see the marketing side of design, but you don't necessarily see how businesses are actually needing to use design within their sales process, onboarding process, and things like that. So I was able to then start to connect the dots in kind of what the requirements are, the design requirements are, and how the brand needs to run continuously through the entire business. So I think that really put me in good stead for where I am today. I mean, things kind of switched quite a lot from there. I was again headhunted by another marketing consultant who I'm still in contact with today, 12 years on. Subsequently helped her and her husband build 3 brands that were all with a plan of acquisition, and we managed to get those through the acquisition process with the amount of brand development that we did. And we've pretty much got to visualize, which is kind of where we are now. I looked this morning, and shockingly, in one way or another, Visualize has been around for 18 years now. Starting as a freelance business while I was still working effectively in around 2006. And then 5 or 6 years ago, things started to get a bit more serious. I was maxing out my time and had to kind of make that decision about whether I stick with what I'm doing and just max out my time basically, or whether it's time to grow the business and see what the future holds. And that's what I've done. Haven't looked back since, and now we're talking today. So
amazing, Jay. So tell me, when you started off Visualize as a design agency, and how has been the journey with Visualize? What are some kind of pitfalls or some kind of difficulties that you faced as an entrepreneur? See, being a freelancer, being a consultant is one thing. We know it's quite simple, but being an entrepreneur, having a team, running a company is a completely different ballgame. So being on the creative side and also being an entrepreneur, how did you balance it out?
With difficulty, that is an honest answer. It is quite a big step. I mean, I didn't go from me to a big team. It's kind of increased gradually over a number of years. I've now got a team of 5, which is just amazing. But things around time management, you haven't just got to dedicate time for design, you've got to dedicate time for business development and lead generation and marketing, of all things. So you have to kind of use the skills that you've gained along the way and kind of flip it slightly and say, well, how are we going to use this now? Just the knowledge and understanding of just how to run a business. I'm very fortunate I've got a business coach, and he's very patient with me at times, but he also knows when to put the hobnail boots on and give me a gentle kick. But it took me a long time to understand things like the numbers, cash flow forecasts and things like that. And I guess not being afraid to kind of reach out to other people as well for advice, because from a freelance world it can be quite internal facing. You think you're just there, you're speaking to customers, but you're not always very outward facing. So networking, talking to people, being able to explain what you do, those are all kind of the learnings along the way, I think.
I think as an entrepreneur, especially in the initial stages when we set up the new companies, wherein we don't have that kind of funding, so we manage everything ourselves. So whether it's marketing department, whether it's the sales department, whether it's your, as simple as even doing your day-to-day jobs in the office, you just handle everything to ensure that it's smooth and running. Great. So
yeah, exactly.
So tell me, Simon, I've been following you on LinkedIn, and I keep getting your amazing emailers now and then. And one very interesting thing that I have observed is that the way, the same topics in terms of design, but the way you actually narrate them in a very beautiful stories. Okay, the way you put it across the topics in a very engaging way, and that those engaging ways actually bring a lot of insight to the business owners. I mean, if it is a small scale or a medium scale business owner, and while especially while approaching a new brand identity design, what is your advice or what is your recommendation that the business owner needs to keep in mind while choosing a good design consultant or a company that would fit into the budgets, but at the same time not deprive them of the creative output?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, that, isn't it? Because, there's a big spectrum of creative assistants out there. You go from like the online systems like Fiverr right the way through up to design consultants and agencies and big brand consultancies. It kind of sounds like a bit of a weird thing to say, but businesses shouldn't necessarily be driven by creativity. That sounds really odd, doesn't it? Like coming from a creative person. But I think, there are some really adventurous, creative designers out there. That's not always right for every business. So you've got to kind of find that halfway house between kind of like how creative do you want to take it? How creative can your industry be with regards to the type of target markets that you are? And actually, maybe in some instances, like B2B is it could be a little bit safer than some of the B2C stuff that's out there. But I think one of the key things that I find, and what the way in which I talk to customers as well, and what I'm hearing from them, is that not every designer is really trying to understand the businesses that they're working with. So, if you're not being asked lots of questions, or if the designer or whoever you're working with, marketing person, isn't kind of like politely pushing back at you slightly, I think that's quite an important thing to consider, because the reasons why we ask lots of questions and we push back slightly is to kind of pull a little bit more information from you and just gauge how far you're willing to go. It's, we're not trying to be rude or anything. It's kind of like we're just like poking you with a stick a little bit, just to get a little bit more information out of you. So I think that's a key thing. Are they asking questions? Do they have a process? We've got a relatively strict process that we'll take clients through. The reason why we do that is because we know it's successful. That doesn't mean that we're not creative off the back of it, because we'll take the client through the process. However, there's a level of creativity that flows across all of those, and it's suited to the type of business or the person that we're working with. So, I think having a successful process is really good. And also one of the things, like if I was a business looking for my kind of services, I'd be looking at how those businesses are promoting themselves. So it's all very good to have a fantastic portfolio that you're working, with other businesses for. But if you really understand design and you really understand brand continuity and you really understand marketing principles, they should be starting to use them themselves in their own business. So, that's probably a good sign that they're going to be able to understand what you're hoping to achieve and be able to take you there.
Actually, that reminded me of a very good incident. We were pitching in for a bank rebranding exercise. We were already late in terms of for the briefing. There were already 4 agencies who were already briefed on the particular project 2 or 3 months back. we got introduced quite late. So like you mentioned, I sent across a questionnaire or a brief format, which had a lot of questions. And the first thing that the client asked me was, how come they didn't ask so many questions? And guess what? The other agencies, I think they presented around 12, 15 options. We presented 2 options and we got selected.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Laser focused.
Yeah. So the creative brief, if you are a business owner, please do ensure that the agency that you're working with does share with you a good questionnaire. A good creative brief is a very good starting point, and to also gauge what the level of expertise that company is into.
Yeah, I think the way in which I always compare it is the difference between taking a brief and building a brief.
Absolutely.
So, if they've got an online form that you're just inputting, you're effectively your instructions to them, and they're not having a conversation with you, it's they're being guided by what you think you need as a business rather than what you actually need as a business. Whereas someone who's asking questions and working out how to build the brief with you as a client is actually looking at a much bigger picture and is looking at the future rather than potentially what you need now. The other comparison that I make on this is AI at the moment. if you don't instruct AI particularly well, you don't give them the right prompts, you're not going to get you're not going to get the right thing out of it. And it's exactly the same in design. If you only get out what you put in. So if as a business, if you're trying to brief a designer and they're not asking you questions and you're not giving them lots of information, probably what you're going to get out of it is not going to be what you're looking for, or it's not going to see you through for 4 to 6 years where you'd hope a successful brand would.
Also, if you can also shed some light on, it's a very crucial thing, especially from the design company like us, is, normally design, especially for the startups and the small, they look at it as a cost.
Yeah.
Okay. And they, one reply I always get from a lot of clients, new clients, probable clients, is we don't have the budgets right now, but if you can do it in this budget, later on as we grow, we'll have budgets. But then, they don't understand that stage of creating the brand identity, creating the first impact is gone. Do you want to shed some light on that in terms of what the approach needs to be from the business owner's perspective?
I think particularly for smaller businesses, there's still a kind of a misunderstanding about what identity is. We joke about it in the marketing space, oh, I just need a logo. Oh, that's my identity. My logo is my identity. And we know very well that it's much bigger than that. Again, this comes down to process. It's not necessarily looking at an identity project. Try to include what you need to go to market with quickly as well, because some agencies, some business, some designers might just stick their finger in the air. Well, usually your type of business needs X, Y, and Z, but actually that might not really be applicable to you. Yes, you might need some business cards, but the other thing might be, irrelevant really. So one of the things we kind of do is again, as part of the briefing process, we identify what they need to go to market quickly. So that might be, well, we've got a website that's got some downloads on it, that's like case studies or use cases or white papers. So those need rebranding. So let's build that into the equation. We're going to need some social media marketing. So let's build that into the equation. So at the point at which we hand over, they are literally good to go at that point. So, I think for businesses wanting to move something forward and take this on board, I definitely try to think of the bigger picture. As you know, Niket, we could just create a logo for someone, but that's not going to be enough for them to take it forwards, and that's not going to give them the ability to be memorable in their space. It's just effectively an icon in the top corner of a letterhead. It's not going to take things forwards.
Absolutely. And so let's go to, what is the process that you actually, the complete design process that you normally typically do for the clients? What exactly is that?
It's really going to depend a bit on the extent and the scope of the project and the type of businesses that we work with. But I mean, that fact find, or discovery level to start off with is super important. Whether, like you said earlier, whether it's some form of questionnaire to kind of tease some information out, or whether that's plus a discovery call where you can start to discuss things. For me, that's paramount. There's no route forwards unless we're able to have that conversation or get more information out of them. Then again, tapping into that kind of building the brief rather than taking the brief principle. We're the experts. We should know what we're talking about. So being able to build out the brief and understand their expectations and their needs and their wants and how they're going to grow, that will come into it as well. So that should be part of the conversation. And then, I think it's not having that scattergun approach. A lot of maybe freelance designers over there that are very junior, some of the online solutions, again, if you ask for an identity, you'll get 10 logos, which, it's very overwhelming for a client, just to see lots of different colors, lots of different directions. They just have no idea where to look next. And that's just going to confuse them. It's going to take more of a process. So being laser focused and really kind of concentrating exactly on what their needs are within their target market, within their sector and things like that, and taking all that on board as well. And then obviously we've just got the rollout, the bit that we love the most, which is where everything starts to come together. One of the things, I think, if there's any designers out there as well that are listening in, I think one of the things that really helps clients is, just being able to visualize stuff a little bit better. So, don't be afraid to use mock-ups. They're really useful. I mean, sometimes I take a simple business card, somebody might the client might look at 2 flats and just go, that looks okay. But then if they see that mocked up in 3D and they can see that there's a bit of shine on it or some spot UV or something, they get excited. It's not their specialism. So we need to get that level of excitement and enthusiasm from them for them to be able to see how things are going to work out for them going forward. So I think that's, presentation, briefing, work, presentation, to be able to get the client really enthused about the direction that we're going is super important.
Great. So once you create this entire identity, you create the brand story. You have emphasized on one of your talks is about the consistency. I think that's something you emphasize a lot on your talks and your emailers. Yeah, I know. I as a designer, I understand the importance of it. Could you share some light on that? And also, if you have some kind of a case study that has helped your client achieve some really remarkable results, that would be great.
I can share a really interesting story, and this happened years ago really early in my career. So we were working with a company that we were building out some presentation slides and sets that were being used. This was going like from marketing into sales. So these are the guys that are going to be out there. They've got to be confident in what they're selling. They've got to be confident in what's behind them on screen, and it's got to be on brand and sit with everything that the client has or the prospect has received throughout the marketing funnel. So the first salesperson goes in and presents about the product. Everything's branded beautifully, no issues whatsoever. Confidence levels are raised, and they're very close to buying the product or service. The client or the prospect at that time then asked for another meeting 2 weeks later, but the original salesperson was on holiday. So they sent another sales guy in because it was urgent and they wanted to get this deal over the line. Now, unfortunately, the other sales guy didn't use the corporate presentation. He decided to use some old stuff that he kind of pieced together from other presentations, and the level of consistency just wasn't there. It just wasn't there. Now, the result of that is that the prospect actually reported back to the company to say, who did you send? Because what we saw was a totally different business presenting what felt like a totally different offering, which has made us really uncertain about whether you're the right business to move forwards with. So, from building that confidence curve throughout the marketing funnel into the sales and then hitting a peak, and then suddenly being presented with stuff that just didn't really connect visually or tonally in any way, suddenly puts them back down again. And to be honest, we find that with any kind of marketing. There's so many marketing touch points that we need to reach now potentially. I mean, I think it's like something crazy like 18 to 25 or even more than that now with the amount that we're presented with out there. If we're not consistent, every time we kind of make someone think differently, we're effectively resetting. Well, I say we're resetting the confidence curve back to zero, because you just don't want to be putting any doubt in anyone's mind about what you're presenting. Now, how does this affect? I think this affects small businesses rather than bigger businesses sometimes, mainly because it could be managing owner managers doing marketing themselves. But things like Canva is absolutely amazing for small businesses. But it can also be really detrimental to your business as well, because every time you log into Canva, it does this really amazing thing of showing you all these brand new templates that are available for you, or these brand new designs. And if you kind of get magpie syndrome and you see the next shiny thing that's on screen and think, oh, I'll just take a bit of that and try that in my marketing, you just reset the confidence curve. So if you've sent out 10 social posts all in a beautiful style, it's all branded wonderfully, and people are like, they're moving closer and closer and closer towards you, and then all of a sudden they're seeing something that's just not you at all, you're starting all over again. So that's the reason why I keep talking so much about this continuity across brand, because I'm still not sure everyone really understands the importance of it fully. Just minor tweaks can make a massive effect for your marketing going forwards.
Yes, absolutely. Completely agree to that, Simon. And that's why I think we have brand guideline books which are created for complete consistency, so that everything, right from your typography, right to your colors, to the tonality, to how the content needs to be written, so that everything is written down so that the team can follow it through.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Simon, I'm getting some really interesting questions on the app. So I'll be just shooting you some questions from our
Okay.
audience now.
Sure.
This one is from Mira. How does the look and feel of a brand contribute to its values and personality?
Oh, that's a nice one. I mean, massively. We talk about the way in which kind of like through the design process, we have to be in tune with our target market. We have to be in tune with the industry sector and things like that. I go back to the kind of people buy from people scenario all the time. We are emotional things. We are emotional beings, and it's so easy for us to connect emotionally to visuals. I actually think there was an article that was launched just before Christmas of last year that suggested that it takes 0.05 of a second for us to connect visually, connect emotionally to something visual. So effectively, in the speed that faster than someone can blink, we've effectively worked out whether we want to connect emotionally to that or not. That's before we've even read any text or understood what the business does and things like that. So I think, visuals, it's massively important with regards to, creating that visual tone. In fact, I'd say we've got to lead with that. And then if we can pull people in on an emotional level because we've used the right type of image that connects with the messaging, then they're going to be able to read the messaging and understand it in the way that we want them to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this question actually it also works from the other way around when we approach designing, because we as designers, I think we also keep in mind the values and the personality, what the brand is all about, define it, and then, how you actually bring it into a visual form. So that also works. I've got another question from Aniket. What tips would you give designers aiming to create unforgettable brand identities?
Unforgettable brand identities. I think it's all about, again, it's looking at the industry sector. So there's bound to be businesses out there that are prepared to break the mold slightly. If we look at accountancies, law firms, and some tech businesses, they can kind of fall into this kind of templated mold of how they need to look. I think as designers, it's down to us to try and give them the opportunity to break out of that mold slightly. So I know I said earlier about kind of it's not all about creativity. We've got to find that balance between the business needs, the industry, and target market, and how creative we can be for them to allow them to stand out. So I think I think that answers the question.
Yeah. And another thing, Aniket, I would also add to is what Simon had earlier mentioned is about consistency. So
Yeah.
brands aren't born on the day one. You will create an unforgettable brand over a period of time if you are consistent. So you look at any of the case studies of like the bigger brands, whether it's Apple, whether it's Nike or any other, like throughout the year, it's been consistent in their tonality.
It's quite interesting actually because this happened a little while ago actually. So when we rebranded Visualize and we used the kind of cyan and the purple color, about 12 months after we did that, I had someone send me a WhatsApp message, and it was just a photo, and they basically the message below it was, "I know this isn't you, but it made me think of you. When can we have a chat?" And all it was that they'd used two angled graphics in purple, and that was all it was. And we hadn't even really been pushing out the brand massively over that 12 months, but she'd obviously come across some of the stuff we were putting on social, maybe email campaigns, received a couple of bits and pieces from me, and instantly saw angles and purple and thought, I need to have a chat with Simon. So that's how simple it can be sometimes.
Form, the visual, the form, and the colors are the first two things that get registered in the brain. So,
Yeah.
in fact, Simon, it's a very interesting case study of Gap as a brand. Gap has a very iconic typography, the condensed font and the
Yeah,
logo.
yeah.
And a few years back, I think they went through a global revamp of the brand identity. And obviously, the brief given to the agency was to make it more modern. And then they they created a logo which was, I think, Helvetica or something, which was like completely destroyed. They spent, I think, a few million of dollars on the creating that. And when they did the research, it was so negative that they had to go back to the old logo. So imagine investing so much of time, effort, and money into this, and so be careful when you're actually doing that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, this is a question from Swati. You've been in this industry for the last 20 years. Tell us how it has evolved. Do you enjoy your work more now, or was it more interesting when you started out?
Oh, I guess I would just say different. I don't, I think we've seen a massive switch and a massive improvement in technology. Coming from a print business where everything's very tactile and, you're looking visually at something that you're holding and there's more points of connection to that maybe, to what we are now, which is a very digital world. It kind of, I don't know. It's kind of a shame that we're potentially losing that. But on the flip side of that, it does mean that there's more of an opportunity from a print perspective. So print costs have come down. Printing techniques have increased still. There's still a market for it. So, for those businesses that haven't necessarily used print extensively, to send out something that's printed or to invest in print in some way can really help them differentiate in the market. How about my experience then versus my experience now? Obviously I was very hands-on in the early part of my career, probably the first 15 years, I'd say. Would I want to go back to that? It was a growth pattern, I guess. It was just a growth, I was earning my stripes effectively. I love where I am at the moment. Yeah, I'm kind of like, I run a team of up to 5. They do amazing work. They're very patient with my enthusiasm and my passion and my processes. But I like taking people through the strategy process now. I like to be able to work with a designer and create something that's absolutely brilliant, but then present it to a client and see the whites of their eye, their eyes widen as they kind of get as enthusiastic as I am when I'm trying to present it to them. I don't think I'd go back. I think, it's all part of the process. And I've always, my kind of philosophy of life has always been everything happens for a reason, negatively or positively. It shapes you in some way. I wouldn't have had the opportunities that I had early on if I hadn't have met the people that I've met at that time. So I think, it's just your natural growth path, and you've just got to embrace where you want to go with it.
Go with the flow.
Go with the flow. Yeah, definitely.
Great, Simon. We have another question. How crucial, this is from Rajesh, how crucial is storytelling for small businesses when crafting their brand identity?
Massive, massive. I'd almost say it's probably more important for smaller businesses than it is for larger businesses sometimes, because depending on the industry, with larger businesses, you've got more to go at to some degree. With smaller businesses, there's probably more of you. There are more small businesses available for people to come to you and discuss things. And even if you look at the design industry, again, if you look at it's all down to price point, but there's a huge band of freelance designers and online services that all hit a certain price point, and being able to differentiate yourself against all of those is massive. So, and I think that's kind of applicable across the entire spectrum of businesses. You need to speak story, value, how you can help, and again, it's that personable approach to people. I think gone are the days like 15, 16 years ago where corporates had a corporate sounding brand. We all know now that we're just talking to people. We don't want to talk to a business because that's just totally impersonal. And some businesses are still trying to take people through an automated process, which works in some instances, but we still like to talk to someone. So I think, we've got to consider that when we're looking at tone of voice and messaging and visual tone as well, and try and build that all into businesses from the start up. It's probably easier to start small and grow that with the business rather than to grow the business and then think, right, now we've got to deal with it, because, it's just a bit more tricky at that point.
I've got another question from Aman. He's asking if is there any good course online that you could recommend to beginners from the design perspective?
I mean, Academy Class is one that was very good with regards to, in the UK, that is, which was very good for learning software and being able to kind of learn the technical sides of using the software. We can be as creative as we like, but if we can't interpret what's in our brain on screen, then that becomes a sticking point. I think there's loads of great content out there. You've just got to look across all the digital spheres, YouTube, TikTok, all those kind of things, and just really understand what you want to do, as a designer. Is it that you want to concentrate on social content and content generate and content creation, or do you prefer brands? And then it's ways in which you can adapt your process as well as your creativity. So picking up lots of different ideas along the way, and not people have got their own ways of doing it. It's not going to work. It's not necessarily going to work perfectly for you. The Future are another amazing online resource as well. So having listened to some of those things, maybe downloading and buying some of their assets, they're very low cost. Even I've done it at times, because we're always learning. The market's always shifting, and it's always interesting to hear other people's thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I think The Future is a very good source because the way he gives the insights into not just the design perspective, but even from the business perspective for the designers is very crucial.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
I have one question from Anand. What's your view on how digital presence shapes a brand identity today?
It's one of those things where, especially if you look at social again, from a business perspective, a lot of the social platforms aren't allowing us to get the reach organically. But there's a massive but here. Everyone needs to appear to be on social, because kind of like if you search for a business, the likelihood is like they're probably, their social profiles are going to come up first. So it's your responsibility as a business to update those, because that could be your first point of connection. So I think building that digital presence is really important. We're in a scrolling mentality now, so we've got to stand out. And it's always one of those kind of things as well that I say to people when they're creating graphics for social is, I think it's in the 70% or around about that figure that people are viewing on one of these. So when we're creating artwork for social, we need to be conscious that the artwork's only been that big on screen, and if there's any small details on there, it's probably going to be lost. So having level of consistency, level of readability will aid your presence, going forward.
Great. Thanks, Simon. So I think we've the questions have been exhausted. We've answered, I think, addressed all the questions that have been given by the audience today. Coming to the end of our talk.
Already, that's been quick.
I'd like to finish talk with a very interesting thought, and I would like to hear from you. Is we speak about building a brand. Okay, can you share a few pointers on how easy is it to kill a brand?
To kill a brand? Wow. I guess it's really easy. There's been instances in the past where, things have been handed over to other people, and it doesn't take long. If we hand over a brand to someone and there isn't a plan in place to how things are going to progress forward. So maybe they've got an internal team, or maybe they're using another creative agency, maybe they're using a creative VA, and they don't quite have the same level of creative experience. I mean, we're talking like a couple of weeks and they could have blown the brand. I mean, literally, because as soon as as creators, as soon as we hand over something to someone, even if we've got a brand guidelines, there's going to be a level of kind of opinion and direction that they may see that they want to take it. Whether, if they haven't got the experience and the knowledge, it may be totally against anything that we would have previously created from a brand perspective. So I think, it's very important to have some form of guidance, some form of guideline document. If it's just for smaller businesses, it doesn't have to be extensive. They don't have to invest loads of money in it. Just a single sheet that they can check that they've got their colors right, check that they're using the right font, check that they've got the right tone across their images. There's enough for anyone to kind of sense check about what they're doing and going out. For bigger businesses, obviously we can go into loads of detail, but yeah, I know from historic experience that it only takes a very short period of time for a brand to break out there. And again, you're just throwing the market. You're throwing the market. If you've built brand confidence, you're going to add question to that. And as soon as we add question, it has adverse effects against our sales and our reputation and everything that goes with it. So
yes, it's quite easy to kill a brand also.
Very easy, yeah.
Well, thank you, Simon. Thank you for coming on the show and really sharing your insights, your experience. And I hope the audience has gained some good pointers, some value additions into whether it's a business or whether it's from a designer perspective. Simon, I'll also share his LinkedIn. If it's okay with you, Simon, I'll share it
Yeah,
on.
absolutely. Yeah. If anyone's, can I ask though that if anyone's connecting with me, if they could please put a message in and just say Design Diaries. I mean, it can be as simple as that, to be honest. Just so I know where they're coming from, that'd be fantastic.
Sure. So you can connect with him, and he has amazing knowledge base articles on the LinkedIn. Do please go through that. It's going to be, and especially from a business owner and the designer perspective. So thank you, Simon. Hopefully, we'll have another session wherein we'll go more in depth of design and how it impacts the sales later on, maybe. And
Perfect. Yeah, love that. Love that.
thank you so much, and have a lovely day.
Thanks, Niket.